Good morning, everyone. Today we're going to talk about chapter number 6, traditional survey research. Let's see from beginning. All right. So first of all, let's start with our learning objectives. We have 4 learning objectives. First, understand the reasons for the popularity of survey research. Second, learn about survey research error. Third, learn about different types of survey research methods. And finally, gain insight into deciding which type of survey method to use. The reasons for the popularity of the survey. And the survey is one of the most popular research methods. And there are a couple of reasons. There are 3 main reasons. Number one is the need to know why. And for example, why did they buy or not buy a particular brand? What did they like or dislike about it? Who or what influenced them? So those are the kind of things we want to know about our brand versus competitive brand. And so that's kind of we want to find out, especially among our current customers and also our former customers and also potential customers. So we want to find out their how they feel about it, about us. And also second thing that they need to know how. How did they make a decision? The consumers gone through different ways of making decisions, and sometimes uh, it's about the price, other times about the brand image, still other times it's about particular product feature, and and also we want to know uh, whether the families, friends had a big influence on their purchase decisions. And obviously, we want to know just where they buy the product, whether it's online, offline, or and even when do they buy the products? You know, how often sometimes, and then obviously we want to know what do they plan to do next. For example, the repeat purchase. You know, how likely are they going to return to purchase from us? The third major reason to use survey research is that to need to know who are our customers. And basically what we need to use a survey research to profile our potential customers, our former customers, particularly our current customers. And we're talking about some of things like demographics, age, income, education, ethnicity, even sometimes political affiliation, the attitudes, interests, some of like we call psychographics, and even geographics. And also we need to know what kind of people would be most likely to influence their decision making. For example, if people, if parents and children uh, buy something jointly, you know, and the decision maker, decision influencer, and sometimes the users, you know, so those are all the things we need to know. And so basically is that why, how, and who. Those are the 3 main reasons for the use of our survey research. And we know that surveys, you know, many people actually are familiar with taking surveys and also very familiar with the survey formats. And many people actually claim that they can make a survey pretty easy. And it is true to a large extent because nowadays, especially with like a quick survey, SurveyMonkey, and it makes it really easy to uh, design a survey questionnaire. But the big difference between professional researchers and amateur researchers that the type of the errors or amount of errors that uh, a professional made survey versus amateur made survey makes big difference. And that's why we need to talk about the errors because survey error has 2 big categories. As you can see on the top, not top left, I mean on the under the total survey, there's a random error. Look at sign, it's like one random error. Random error we're talking about we call sampling errors. Sampling errors, you really cannot eliminate them. What you can do is you can increase the sample size to reduce the sample error. And then that's the only way you can reduce sample random error by increasing sample size. And for example, if you our current random error sampling error is like point plus minus 1.5, and if you want to reduce the sample error to, let's say, 0.75, we need to increase our sample size by 4 times. Why? Because it's a relationship. Basically it's 1.5 divided by 0.75 equals 2. So 2 we basically reduce your sample error by just 50%, but you need to quadruple your sample size. So many times it's not economical to just reduce your random error, because you would increase much more costs. The second major category of the survey error is actually pretty complicated, and which we labeled as systematic error or bias. Systematic error in the sense that it actually also has two bigger categories. One is called a measurement error, which is on the left side, you can see that. And the second category is called a sample design error. Remember, sample design error is different from sampling error, because sample design error is coming from the designers of your sample. It usually is someone with PhD in statistics for a major research firm. They would design how big a sample size is, and also how to basically talk about and also in terms of selection, how would they select the sampling elements into your sample. And obviously talk about another type of error called frame error, basically sampling frame, which we're going to discuss when we talk about sampling in pretty much big detail. And then the third type of design error is called population specification error. And this also had to do with the designers of the sample and how many mistakes they would make when they design the sample. And besides the sampling error and the systematic error, we have something called measurement error, which has like 6 big subcategories. I'm going to go over a little bit quickly, because they're very complicated in the sense that they're difficult to remember. But then first of all, it's like talk about a process error, which is simple, like in the process of inputting your numbers and also conducting statistical error analysis, the researchers might make some mistakes, those kind of process error. Second, called the response bias. Response bias coming from respondents. Respondents, sometimes they respond to a survey question without knowing that they're committing some implicit errors, and they misunderstanding the questions. Other times could be that they don't understand the questions. Still other times that they respond in a pattern, in a way that's going to produce errors for the researchers. And the third type of measurement error called non-response bias. Non-response bias basically means that the people who don't respond versus people who respond, they might be systematically different. Then, and especially non-responses have some kind of pattern. For example, if you call people at home in the daytime, and then the people who don't respond, probably they're people who have professional job, versus people who respond to your surveys are probably people who don't work outside home. They probably the homemakers, and those people who don't respond might produce some kind of error. And then the fourth type of measurement error is we talk about the instrument bias. That is the design of the survey itself. Maybe we talk about the survey questionnaire, and if there are lots of errors when you design those survey in terms of the wording, in terms of the layout, and then you create the problems, biases for the respondents. And the fifth type of measurement error is called interviewer error. And the interviewer error meaning that interviewers sometimes are tired, other times they probably have some social interactions with respondents so that they might bias the respondents' responses. And so that's kind of interview error because interviewers, they may not be consistent. If you have two interviewers, that even bigger problem because the interviewers are different, and then they might generate different biases from the respondents. And number 6 called a surrogate information error, meaning basically means that the type of questions you put on the questionnaire, you think you're measuring something, but it doesn't measure the actual thing. So that's called a surrogate information error. Basically has something to do with the information, just intention, like sometimes intention, you think you're measuring something, but you're not really getting to the real thing when you measure it. So that's kind of the measurement error, 6 different types of measurement errors. And also we have systematic error, another category called a sample design error. So, in a nutshell, the survey have all kinds of errors. And then obviously, if you have too many errors in the survey and survey design and the sampling, then the results coming from your survey research might be put in question. So that's a big thing. Talk about the sampling error, not sampling error, survey errors. Next, we're going to talk about the types of surveys, and those are the kind of things that the tools that we have in our toolbox. Basically, we look at the pros and cons, try to figure out which type of survey we would use for our particular situation. And the 3 different types of surveys on this slide is that actually you have some commonality. If you examine the door-to-door exec interviews and the more intercept interviews, all have people involved, meaning that they have actual researchers directly involved into this in the process. In the door-to-door, for example, they basically interviewers would conduct a survey face-to-face, usually in their homes, and obviously, have some pros. For example, you can contact customer directly, and you can do product demonstrations. You can adapt as especially if you explain the questions, if you think that your respondents might feel confused, or those are really advantage. And usually response rates tend to be pretty decent or good. The downside of the door-to-door survey is that usually, they're expensive in the developed countries like the United States, UK, the labor cost. And also, by the way, but it's not a big problem for developing countries like India or like say China. And still labor costs are relatively low. Second thing is that they have some bad image problem because people mistake them as salespeople. They want to sell products, and people don't want people knock on the door peddling products. Okay, that's a bad image issue. The third type of the disadvantage is called liability. Liability basically means that when you have interviewers go door to door, they sometimes got hurt by their dogs, or sometimes get into the rural areas. People think you're the people intruding in their privacy, and you gotta sometimes got into problem, and it's almost like a mailman in many areas. Next thing is to talk about safety issues. Again, it's related to liability because the interviewer personnel might face a safety issue, and they so that's something we need to keep in mind. So in general, door-to-door is not really a viable method of research in the United States, in developed nations. The second category called exec interviews. Exec interviews basically we talk about it's like a industry equivalent, meaning that we're basically talking about the companies. The company usually decision makers, the CEO, the CFO, CMOs, those kind of people. We want to get their insights into a particular issue. For example, we can interview CMOs of Fortune 500 companies with regard to issue of digital branding, then that involves uh, a significant amount of the just the face-to-face interview, and so really really good. Usually you can get a really the best insights in terms of digital branding because they're at the forefront of the digital marketing, digital advertising, that kind of area. So they know what's going on, the first-hand information. So that's and also when you have an in-depth interview with executives like CMOs, you can have a complicated like questioning. You can actually dig deeper into their mind, into your thinking, feeling about the digital branding, for example. And the downside, obviously, it's like usually those people are extremely busy. You know, just difficult to get a hold of them. And if you just sometimes just get their secretaries, which is not very helpful. I mean, they're not the same as the executives themselves. Also, tend to be less reflective of a population. We're talking about like probably you cannot generate a random sample or probability sample from to get it done properly. The third type of survey is called more intercept interviews. More intercept actually is it's not just in the mall. I mean we but many times we do conduct those interview inside a mall, and typically it could be on the high traffic area locations. You can intercept the people randomly, try to ask them if they're interested in particular some survey, and then you have a survey. You just asking questions one by one, and you just talk to them face to face. So again, the pros actually, you can have direct customer contact. You can do product demonstrations. You can actually, especially food products, or just the food, and also some of the products require the touch and taste and sight, sound, lots of things. You can let consumers really get a complete good experience out of it. Like say, like for example, massage gadgets. Those massage chairs are inside the mall. I mean, you want to have them be able to have a first-hand experience before the consumers usually want to know how do they feel. Those tend to be expensive on the high end, so they want to have first-hand experience before so that before they can really decide what to buy or not. And the more intercept, also the problems of more intercept actually, they tend to be more expensive, and also there's representation error, meaning that the sample size, the sample may not be reflective of the general population of the target market. And then more intercept also has some bad image issue, like for example, people might think that it's too intrusive, just asking too many questions. Or so those are more intercept. It's something that also a very important survey method, like for marketer to use. And the next slide, we have two types of surveys, and actually second category is called a call center telephone interviews, and then the second called computer-assisted telephone interviews. This is actually based upon the telephone. Now, instead of a face-to-face interaction, this is actually interaction through telephone calls. And again, there's an advantage of having this because you have a professional guiding the process of interview, and then you tend to be able to to get a very good information out of this kind of interview. And typically the interview is conducted from a central location, and usually you can have some good segmentation, meaning that you can call different segments of the target audience. Let's say 18-34, one segment, and 35-44, another segment. Obviously, you can also do you can be able to verify who is responding on the other end of the telephone. The downside of the call center interview is that it tend to be expensive, and response rates are going down because people are less likely to pick up a phone nowadays, and also you cannot have a long survey because people are in a hurry. They don't want to respond to your questions, like more than 15 minutes. 15 minutes is pretty long, actually. Uh, the second type on this slide is that called a CADI system, a computer-assisted telephone interview. Basically, that it is a computerized telephone interview system, and when you have a computer assisting interviewers collect information, you can actually data can be directly enter into a computer, and also you can have the computer just help you to detect the data entry errors. And because if you type in, say, one means yes, two means no, and then you type three, and three is going to be rejected, so that as interviewers make phone calls, and they can type in the data directly into the system. And plus, you can have computers do the complicated skip patterns. For example, if the answer is yes, and the computer automatically can can show the set of questions that will be related to the yes responders. And if the answer is no, and then the different sets of questions would have been popping up on your screen. So this helps reduce just errors on the part of the interviewers. The downside of the CADI system is that we have computer glitches, especially nowadays. Lots of computers actually depending upon the internet. Even the telephone now increasingly are based upon internet. If internet's got down, and then you don't have this, you're going to have huge problem of just you have to contact them later, or sometimes you won't be able to contact them until your system comes back. And number two is that it's expensive because its equipment tend to be very expensive. Not many firms have the financial resource to purchase that kind of equipment. And another thing that you need interviewer training. You need to train interviewers how to use that machine efficiently. So that's the three counts for the CADI system. And the next slide shows there are three types of surveys, which we call as you can see, that non-professional assisted. If you look at the self-administered questionnaires, and on the mail surveys, email, internet survey, all those kind of surveys actually it's respondents need to figure out themselves how to fill in those information. And let's look at each at a time. Self-administered questionnaires, usually the response, the pros actually is that respondents can take the time and tend to have a good response rate because they're not in a hurry. They're not under pressure to complete their survey. The downside is because they're not under pressure, many times they don't complete it as quickly as they're supposed to be. And then just the researchers might make it too long. Research might overcomplicate survey since respondents have more time, meaning that researchers thinking that they have more time, sometimes we make the questions more complicated in the sense that probably they ask too many questions. The second type of survey called mail survey, which is just pretty straightforward. Talk about we get the surveys from in the mail. So in the mail we have different kinds of the system going on. Talk about we have especially talk about the mail panels. And nowadays, big research firms, they all have like so-called the panel members. The panel members, many times, they have those registered users, registered consumers who are in their pool, and then they got paid by a certain amount of money. Sometimes got paid in kind, meaning the product themselves, so they can just be ensure that they have a better response rates, just in the sense that because you're in a panel. Just they're more likely to respond if you belong to a panel, and then the research companies can manage that panel to maximize their response rates. The problems with this, the problem, the pros that the cost is not that expensive, compared with other type of surveys. And then, if your mailing list is pretty precise, and then you tend to get a pretty good uh, data out of those responses. And since it's a mail survey, you can tend to have a little longer questionnaires, meaning that you can get more information from each particular respondent. The problem with the mail survey, obviously, nowadays because the people are not checking their snail mails as much, and so that your response rate might go down, increasingly with more people opting in for the electronic stuff. And second thing to talk about the mail survey, that your mailing list might be out of date. Mailing list coming from the many times from those research firms that specialize in generating those mailing lists. They typically coming from they data mine U.S. Census data. They data mine other public available information to generate the kind of the mailing list that'll be useful for particular marketer. And obviously, mail survey that there's no control in terms of who actually completed survey. So this is because anybody got the mail. They can some member in the household or some other people might get a hold of it and respond it. And then next thing is that because it's a mail survey, you have to have people input the data. So when you input the data, and then people make mistakes, and then that's a big problem for mail survey. It's so the third type of, it's called the survey is kind of email internet survey. Obviously, this is actually the big one. We're going to talk about the online survey research next time. The pros obviously cheap, direct access, quick information, and you can get the results, actually download results fast as they are being conducted, and also can contact hard to reach population. Usually response rates are pretty good, decent, for the internet email surveys. So the counts, obviously, response rates, they nowadays actually for the, especially with the email nowadays, many times if you don't have much incentives, many times they just get into junk mail. This is a big problem. And also, you send a mass mailing and then you cannot verify who responded. And there might be security issues. You don't know who filled out the survey. And also, survey has a problem of the sampling bias, meaning that you're not representative of the population. Okay, so this is this sort of category. We're going to dig deeper into the into it on chapter number 7, talking about the online research. Now let's talk about the strength and weakness of each methods in terms of quality of data produced. And if you look at this big it's exhibit, like look at the strengths and weaknesses. I mean, we have already covered many of them, but if we put them into one place so that we can have some really good understanding of the strengths and weakness with regard to data quality. Okay, and data quality is of super importance, because if we have bad data, and the result won't be of much use. So MoIntercept, if you look at MoIntercept, call center, telephone, this for first top 2, obviously you have the people involved. Okay, if you have people involved, you can really explain, you can show, you can probe in respondents. And also, obviously, with the call center interview, you can do, supervisor can monitor interviewing process easily, make sure quality control is good, and they have excellent sample size, excellent samples. You can get it done through the call center interviews, and make sure you have the good data. That's what we did talk about, is that you have representative of the population, the data quality. So the weaknesses, obviously, you can see, mall intercept interview, you have in the mall, inside the mall, you have lots of distractions, and responding maybe in a hurry and not in the proper frame of mind to answer certain questions. They're in a hurry, so they may give you answer you want to hear, and then you have the interviewer bias because you have social interaction, and obviously we have sampling issues as well. For call center, respondents may be distracted by things that are going on at their location, because when you call people, people may be not at home, or sometimes, especially if you call the cell phone, they might be not at home, And also, when you have a too long interview, people got tired, they got fatigue, and then they want to stop the interview. And so, especially if the probing going too long and then consuming the film, they might be too much into their private life. They might refuse to continue. As you can see, look at the self-administered questionnaire, and you have this interviewer strengths. Obviously, is that you don't have this social interaction going on. Consumers complete survey or questionnaire at their own time, and then they can just even change their responses and look up information and work at their own pace and no pressure. The downside is that obviously, sample may be poor because of non-bias, non-response, because people don't send it back to you, and obviously, no interviewer can explain a probe, which actually is an advantage of the mall intercept and call center. And the mail survey, obviously, it's a problem. It's that they have similar issues or strengths as the self-administered survey questionnaire. So this slide is very important. I want you to really focus on this pros and cons in terms of data quality. And then we want to talk about the factors that determine the selection of a particular survey method. So we look at those 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I mean, we have 8 different factors to consider, which by the way is a lot if you think about normally human beings are able to analyze a situation maybe 2 factors or 2 by 2. It's a 4 different scenario, and then beyond 2 by 2, it's going to be very complicated. But we're just play by our rules. Go one at a time. First, I want to talk about sampling precision. Now, remember we talk about sampling precision, meaning that how accurate do you want your sample to be in terms of sampling errors, and which also is called a random error. And so the more accurate you want your sample to be, the results to be, the bigger sample size you want to have. And so that's kind of cost issue. If you have more money, obviously you can afford to buy to make sure you get more accurate. And let me give you a concrete example. If your sampling precisions could be plus minus 3 percentage points, and then plus minus 3 may basically mean that it could be the numbers could be swing between the 6 points. In the election, 6 points is a big deal. Sampling error is 0 to 6. Let's say Biden, competed against Trump. If the lead is like only 4 points, and then if they tell you sampling error is like 0 to 3, like plus or minus 3, then it's neck competition. 4 points doesn't mean anything. So really, but if you want to be more accurate, like a plus minus 1, that tells me that you have to increase your sample size by 9 squared, not 9 squared, 3 squared equals 9. So if the original sample size is like 1,000, suddenly your sample size would just surge to 9,000, which is really expensive and time consuming to do. Second, the factor obviously talk about the budget, actually related to the sampling position as well. How much money is available for you doing the sample survey. And the third factor to talk about is the taste test and the prototype usages tend to require face-to-face interactions. And also, so those are stuff that you need to expose respond to various stimuli and have respondent perform specialized tasks. Sometimes we have people do the like photo swords, do something. So you need to have face-to-face interactions, without which you cannot really do it. So taste test, obviously, you need to, for example, if you want to uh, do some like testing for your toys, like for example, and the kids must play with it, and you observe and you ask them questions many times. So I mean, you cannot do it using the other survey research methods. Next factor is called the quality of data required. Quality, how accurate do you want your data to be? That's we actually previous slide we talked about the different methods. I mean, just the call center probably can produce a very good quality data versus other type of survey methods. And the length of his questionnaire and long survey questions are difficult to do by mail, over the phone, or in a mall. So it's really really difficult when you do a long survey question. People have less likely to complete. You know. Next factor is talk about incidence rate. The incidence rate is the concept that just the idea of incidence rate that what percentage of people do you have in a particular population? Let's say if you want to do a survey on Native American students among Cal State Fullerton. Now that's going to be very hard to do because it must be less than 1% of Cal State Fullerton students are Native Americans. But on the other hand, if you want to do a survey among Cal State Fullerton students like Latino students, I mean, we have almost more than 40%. That's very, very easy to get. So that's why we call incidence rate. You have a low percentage of of a particular segment of population, then it's a low incidence rate. If you have high percentage of the segment population of segment in the population, then you have a high incidence rate. So we want to make sure that you don't want to find like we so-called needle in a haystack. I mean, if you do that, it's going to be very expensive. Next factor is talk about degree of structure of the questionnaire. Now, highly unstructured questionnaires may require data collection by personal interview. What does it mean? Because it basically means that you have lots of probing questions, you have lots of like open-ended questions, and then that requires face-to-face interaction. Or sometimes we require a phone call. Call them back and forth. So that you can get the data. So on the other hand, a structured questionnaire like we call closed-ended questions. It only like involves yes or no and click multiple choice questions. That's easy. You do in a survey question. So also the time available to complete survey. So just if you have lots of time in hand, obviously you can do the snail mail. But if you want to have a quick turnaround, and internet is the fastest way to go. That's obvious, right? Next slide, let's look at how we increase response rates. How do we increase response rate? Those are the conventional wisdom that we just compiled over years of mail survey, especially mail survey response rate. Here, this is what we can do to increase mail survey response rates. There are lots of them. I mean, they are very straightforward. And the good mail survey designer know which button to push to increase the response rate. Number one is talk about first one, the advanced voice call or telephone call alerting respondent to survey. Like giving some kind of heads up so that we're sending you a mail survey, and then you expect that to respond. And that also very, very helpful because people are busy. If you remind them, they are looking for it. Number two, you have a follow-up. If they don't respond by a certain number of days, usually maybe say in 10 days, and they don't, 10 to 15 days, 2 weeks, no response, and you make a phone call and then or send a postcard. The next type of incentives that talk about the monetary incentive, half a dollar, sometimes like just a dollar. I mean, but we find also the monetary incentives are not really a big one because people don't care that much anymore. Just half a dollar is not much of value. Actually, the more effective way probably something called down on the list, the promise of contribution to favorable charity. Like say charity, you contribute $1 to your favorable charity. That's actually better than just straightforward just monetary incentives. And also you can give them stuff like premiums, pencil, pen, keychain, those promotional products, premium give to them for free. And then obviously you want to make sure that you put some postage stamps rather than meter envelopes. Meter envelopes obviously are much more inexpensive, meaning that you put the postage stamp sounds like a real letter rather than just the mass mail stuff. Self-addressed stamped return envelope. I mean, you don't expect your respondents to pick up the cost of stamps. I think nowadays actually the first class like 55 cents. It's getting more and more expensive. I mean, compared with maybe 20 years ago, you don't want like 20 cents. So this is the respondent don't want to pay for that kind of survey. And also you can personalize it, your cover letter, your addresses, if you know the respondent's name, and also the situation that the particular household, like Mr. or Mrs. Sometimes a doctor, if you know their have doctor degree, address them as a doctor, so that makes them feel more likely to respond. And entry into a drawing for prizes. We talk about sweepstakes, basically. That actually works pretty well. You have a chance to enter to win iPad or something, or just new iPhone. That tend to be working very well. Although the odds of getting an iPad or iPhone is very small, but people are willing to bet on their low odds. And next up, we talk about the emotional appeal. Just write some emotional letters so that they would willing to spare just some time for your research efforts, and in conjunction with something called affiliation with universities or research institutions, so that it sounds more likely it's not for benefit, but it's more likely for some objective fact-finding, that kind of situation. Personally signed cover letter. That is also a very good way of increasing response rates. And personally signed cover letter basically means that your signatures look like someone has signed it for you, like CEO's signature, but actually it's signed by machine. I was once or twice actually at the direct marketing conference. They have a trade show, and some vendors actually sell that kind of machines. It's very, very good, and you can like mimic some CEO's signatures or CFO's signatures extremely well. Obviously, you can do the multiple mailing of the questionnaire. You can just the second time, just make sure if you don't get a response rate the first time. And you can also do a reminder that you can remind people that just to respond, to participate. For male panel participants, if they're in your panel, I mean, that they need to respond. So that's those are the response rate. Now, we mentioned previously about incidence rate, which is the percentage of people or household in the general population that fit the qualification to be sampled. I give you an example about our university, CSUF students. Like we have 40% of Latino students, which is actually say incidence rates are pretty high compared with Native American students, which I think less than 1%. And the second type of rate called cooperation rate. Basically means that percentage of qualified persons contacted who agree to complete the survey. Now, basically means that so if you if you find the qualified people and then who agree to complete survey, basically means that they're willing to complete survey. Obviously, that's different from the response rate, which is actually responded versus that they intended to respond to two different things. I mean, obviously, the response rate would be lower than cooperation rates, and the cooperation rates would be lower than incidence rates. Okay, so that's we talk about assessing the population. We need to remember these two different rates. Okay, now obviously this is the last slide, and I want you guys to look at on the website, on our Canvas website, look at the sample survey question, because I heard from actually I not heard I got an email from some of you about what type of survey questions we're going to design for our survey research, which by the way, it's going to be due, by the end of the semester. After you guys completed the situation analysis, you need to begin to design this survey. So this is a sample survey. It's actually conducted by a research firm, decision support system research firm, which actually whose I think the CEO actually is one of the co-authors of the book, of a textbook. So this is a pretty good survey, and I want you to look at this survey at your own leisure time, and then take a look at those the format and the type of questions, and also the structure, the layout, and so we'll talk more about this survey questionnaire design. I think in chapter number 9. So we'll talk about it. So those are the survey questions. I want you to take a look at it, and then just so get you a sense of what type of what type of survey we're talking about. This is the type of the survey we're talking about here. All right, I think that's pretty much all for our lecture on traditional survey research. So